Hey everyone. So, like most people, or a lot of people, I got sucked into this big brouhaha, this drama, this very dramatic episode between Tucker Carlson and the whole neocon crowd and everyone who's really ticked off at him for having Nick Fuentes on his show. I've been paying attention to this because there is, well, it's interesting, but it's also the fact that politics has become even more dramatic. And that has obviously been done because of the internet and particularly social media. Whereas before, you used to have articles and maybe op eds, and maybe they duel in those uh, platforms or those venues. But now you have social media, and everyone kind of gets to jump in. And there's a lot of bickering and back and forth. There's no gatekeepers. So it just gets really, really loud. And we do live in a really, really loud world. I do think, though, that there is an advantage to this, and I think it makes it better in the sense that as much as I hate social media and I hate technology, and I'm going to do something in the future about that because I'm reading a very interesting book that basically makes the case that technology has ruined what it means to be human, and I think there's a lot to that. But since it's already here, and I'm on it, and there's a lot that's going on. I think some of the good that's happening is that the gatekeepers are no longer as effective, if effective at all, at basically keeping out who they want to. So Tucker interviewed Nick Fuentes, and um, it was a big deal. It still is a big deal. The whole thing's been raging on, I think, ever since it's happened. I think we're on week two. I watched the interview, I think, when it initially came out. I've known a little bit about Nick Fuentes. I think the last time, up until recently, that I watched anything of his or listened to anything of his was maybe a year and a half ago or something. I was renovating our old house, which we ended up selling, and I kind of put in the background because I had listened to so many podcasts, and so I was like, what else can I learn from and whatnot? And I didn't necessarily go to Nick Fuentes to learn from. I just wanted to see what the big deal was about because every time they say someone is racist and whatever, not every time, but a lot of times they're just wrong. Well, it turned out that I mean, it didn't take long, and I heard him say things. I'm like, well, that does seem kind of racist. That does seem racist. So I didn't really give it much thought after that. I think I didn't. I didn't listen to the whole thing. My wife was there too, and she's like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Nobody. You don't need to worry about it, babe." So, anyway, so Tucker has him on his show. The whole thing blows up, and I'm reading a lot of the condemnations and all the bickering and the back and forth, and everyone's trying attacking Tucker. Everyone's attacking Tucker because Tucker's the real issue here, I guess, or he's the real target. And so this is a perfect facade to try and get rid of Tucker because he has taken on narratives and stances that I would say most of the time, almost always, they're correct. He's non-interventionist. He questions why in the world are we helping the Ukrainians. He has painted the Ukrainians for the corrupt government and that they are. It's we used to know the American public used to and the American media used to portray Ukraine for what it was, and that was utterly corrupt, super corrupt, very corrupt. The magazine for which I'm a contributor at, where I'm a senior writer at, we've been writing about Ukraine. We wrote about the Azov Battalion, which is a Nazi-oriented militant or part of the military there, or some sort of militant group there. It's like a lot of those things. I mean, they've been happening and they continue to happen. And I did an article not too long ago about uh, everything that's going on in Ukraine, including the fact that they are jailing priests who supposedly are Russian assets. They're not. That's just what they say. So so Tucker, that was one of the many legitimate stances that he took, and they hated that. They hated that he talked to Putin, which I think was a great move. Absolutely. If we're about to go to war, or we're in a silent war or a proxy war with this nation, let's find out what they have to say. I'm just so tired of this thing where we're told that we can't hear from these people. from these people who were supposed to, they tell us that we're supposed to hate these people, that they're our enemies, and a lot of times they are, but then they're like, no, you can't hear from them. That's insane. That's really insane. Because the truth is, a lot of the time, you'll learn that they are a bad guy, or sometimes you'll learn that they have some legitimate stances, which is actually how it is with Putin. There's what his legitimacy comes from the fact that he's saying that their country was being encircled by NATO, that um, there was a campaign against Russia. That's absolutely true. I've covered this. I've written about it. There's for the neocon foreign policy experts and the ones who had a hand in foreign policy, including Dick Cheney, have said that was the goal, was to encircle and break up Russia. He's not lying about that. We need to know the truth, because the truth, you know, it's gonna it's going to help us see things differently, and hopefully it'll help us have a different approach. They don't want us to have the truth on a lot of these things, because the narrative has been controlled a lot of the times, most of the times, to push through a very particular agenda. And when it comes to the media has been captured over the last century. There's been a march through the communications institutions and the educational institutions, from the media to academia, even through K through 12. It's been captured by globalist elites, by people whose interests are building an international world order. And so it's been captured, and the idea has been to basically create a matrix, an informational matrix, a communication style matrix, where the things that we know and hear or were thought are aligned with the direction in which they want to push the country. And the direction they want to push the country is a socialist, commie style, technocratic, with a big, not just a grain of salt, but like a big dumping of technocracy, because that's going to be the main way that they control us. You can see it, it's building, it's obvious. It's obvious that's where this is going. It's obvious that's where it's been going for a long time. And it's so obvious why they want to control the narrative. So in comes social media, and all of a sudden everyone can yammer, and most of it is noise. A lot of it is really abhorrent. Some of it, actually, most of it is really stupid. It's meaningless and whatever. But it also allows everyone to kind of get in on the action. Allows everyone to talk, and allows us to hear all sorts of views. And so Tucker, for whatever reason, and I have my um, my guesses as to why he brought in Nick Fuentes. He's not the president of Iran, who we bombed. He's not the president of Russia, who we're in a this close to being in a hot war with, but it's just a proxy war for now. He's this kid who who has a large following, but who says genuinely racist and bigoted things. That's not up for debate. Again, I'm aware of the whole crowd, the whole, oh, everything's racist crowd. I get it. That happened. And to some degree, I mean, it's dying now because everyone recognizes, like, shut up. You can't make everything racist. But Nick Fuentes genuinely says racist things. And so after the interview, I actually spent some time last week. I watched a couple of his episodes full on from the beginning to the end, because I wanted to, I do this when I'm really interested in something, that I like to go right to the source and figure out that part of the equation. And so I'm watching, and um, I said something on social media not too long ago where I think I agreed with Christopher Rufo. He wrote something about it, saying something that, to the degree that the thing that we really miss, that everyone's missing about Nick Fuentes, is essentially that he's an actor and he may not even believe what he says he believes. I think there's some truth to that. For instance, everyone believes that Nick Fuentes is racist. I heard him personally. I think it was on the Thursday or Friday show. He used the N word. He's definitely, like, totally anti-Jew. Okay, but so he says, use the N word or whatever, the real one, not the the other one, I guess, or whatever. I don't know how you want to call it. So stupid, I know. And but he's like really good friends with Kanye West, or Ye, as he's now called, because I noticed that a lot of what's called his super chatters, his little fans who paid for him to read their comments out loud. They're like, "Hey, what do you think of Ye?" I guess he bowed down to or asked forgiveness for a rabbi, and he refused to denounce Ye. And then I think on the second night, he went into this long diatribe about how Ye is like this really amazing person, and he really cares about people and things like that, and he's just this amazing person. And I'm like, well, how racist can you be? Like, what is this? Like, and so that's kind of Rufo's point is it's like, I don't think he knows what he believes. And maybe Rufo didn't want to admit what I'm going to admit is that I watched his show. I watched his show because I want to know who the heck is this kid? What does he really believe? You know, it's like, is there something there that we're missing? And I confirmed one that he says racist things. He appears to be racist somewhat, but how racist is he? I don't know, but that's not my job to place. I'm not defending it. I don't agree with any degree of racism. I'm a Christian. He claims he's a Christian, and I'm not one to necessarily judge. But I got to say, it's like if you read your Bible, you'll see that God is no respecter of persons in a sense. He genuinely judges. Your salvation is judged by uh, by your by your commitment, by the life that you lead, not that of your race, not that of your countrymen, by you. So the Lord, even though and he made us all, he made us like nothing ever got out of control for God. Let's not forget that. So you know, for whatever reason, he made all these people, and there's no way that you can convince me that he doesn't love black people, that he doesn't love Latino people, that he doesn't love white people, that he doesn't love Jews. And yes, I believe he loves Jews too, absolutely. So that's kind of where my basis is for that. So, but I'm not exactly sure how racist he is. He appears to be some racist, whatever. But again, it all goes back to Rufo's point that he may not even know that maybe he's just doing it to be theatrical, to be outrageous, and whatever. But I mean, he also likes Candace Owens, who is black. Okay. And he defended Candace, although they've had some back and forth or whatever. But there was a moment there where he was talking about her and he was so smiling and beaming. And me and my wife were like, is he have a crush for her? And then he joked about it later on and whatnot. So again, he seems to be kind of all over the place. And again, maybe it's just because he's just this chaotic kid who, he doesn't have his views all ironed out or whatever. And, he just says outrageous things maybe um, because it works for whatever it is. But I want to get into that because I think that Nick Fuentes is a symptom, is a toxic reaction to a lot of very legitimate grievances. And after having watched and read, after having watched, I don't know, like 6 hours, because his shows are really long, 6 hours of his show, and reading a whole lot about the whole thing and everything, and then knowing what I know, I will tell you where his concerns are very legitimate and why they're gaining traction. And as to my suspicion as to why maybe Tucker platformed him. Okay. So the first grievance that he has is this his show's called America First. So, and he talks a lot about it. So his first grievance is that we have what's called an interventionist foreign policy. America has not always had an interventionist foreign policy. In fact, it used to be non interventionist, meaning that we did what George Washington, primarily what George Washington prescribed in his farewell address, which was basically to stay out of the meddling of foreign countries. Not only do not be influenced by foreign countries, but don't go and get wrapped up in Europe's drama or anyone else's, because we first of all, he says we have this great big ocean here, and we're in a very special, awesome situation where we don't need to get sucked into all their affairs. I mean, Europe has a huge history of all sorts of drama and wars and whatnot. He says we don't need to be part of that. Okay, he makes this case over and over about how we don't need to be part of this international, all these international squabbles. It makes us weaker and whatnot. Now, in the 20th century, that started changing, and that was on purpose. And the globalist elites, the international globalist elites, they made a special effort to change the way that Americans view uh, foreign intervention so as to support what the empire building that we've been doing for 100 years. Okay. Nick Fuentes is against this, and rightfully so. Okay. Because it's made us weaker. We deploy resources and military and humans. We lose humans. We lost so many humans just in the whole Middle East debacles that we've been involved in the last 20, 30 years. I'm related to people who have injured in those. Fortunately, no one I know has died, but a lot of people have died there. Thousands of soldiers have died there. We have increased our national deficit exponentially because of those adventures, those just totally uh, corrupt and erroneous adventures that we should have never been in. Okay. So maybe if we stop that crap, then that's going to give Nick Fuentes less appeal. Another thing he's really into, and on that front there is this whole thing, like, he really hones in on the Jewish lobby, and I think he gives the Israeli lobby way too much credit, but there's credit nonetheless, because there is an Israeli lobby. It is very powerful. Donald Trump himself has said it. He told the Daily Caller a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that the Jewish or the Israeli lobby was the most powerful lobby that he'd ever seen. But he tried to say that's no longer the case. I don't know if that's the case, but this isn't anti Semitic. This isn't bigoted. Okay. The Israeli lobby is very powerful, and the Israeli on behalf of Israel. That doesn't mean other countries don't, because I think the solution here is not just to be like, oh, it's the Jews. No, how about we don't let any foreign countries influence our foreign policy? So let's nip that in the bud, because if you start nipping that in the bud and you start putting America first, then that gives him less fodder. That's one less massive grievance that people who listen to him can say, oh, yes, yes, nobody else will talk about it. Whatever. Tucker's talking about it, which, by the way, let's get this parallel road. One of the main reasons Tucker is being accused, if not the main reason, is because of this. He is attacking the foreign policy. America's foreign policy is how the world government is being built. The American military is the tip of the sphere as far as the global military arm that is creating the global order. Okay, we're exporting through all these NGOs. We're exporting the values that are supposed to um, facilitate this emerging global order. The deviancy, the lack of patriotism, the anti-Christian, all of that. It's all being exported because it's there to facilitate a one world system. And obviously, if you have people who are nationalists or who have a loyalty to their country, if you have people who are more loyal to God, then whatever laws they're going to impose on us, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so that's the foreign policy is how they're doing that. They're going in there in countries, they're gaining access, they're shaping their governments, they're picking their puppet leaders and things like that. They're draining them of their resources, which then we bring back here, and then we use them to shape this world and whatnot. That's the goal of this. And Tucker is attacking that. He's really going at that, and he's saying this is not the way we should be doing. This is not America first. And so that is why he's really, really over the target. And this Nick Fuentes thing, he just happened to give him a pretty good opening. So that's the big one. The big one is our foreign policy, our interventionism, and in allowing other nations to influence our policies. All of those things are happening. It is undisputable, and you need to. If we address those, that's just those issues alone. That's going to give Nick Fuentes far less power. Now, there's another thing that he really hammers on, and again, it's true, and that is this anti-male, anti-white, anti-Christian culture. All of those things, we've all been seeing that. We all know those things are happening. Okay, so I mean, there's been various investigations now. The IRS targeted Christians, and of course, we've developed into a to some degree, a very anti-Christian culture, and Christians have been attacked and whatnot. And so it's clearly developed into that. And so even though I'm not sure what kind of a Christian he is, and maybe he is a Christian, just a bad one, because I think there's lots of bad Christians. I'm a bad Christian sometimes, or maybe most of the time, and whatnot. And so that part is true as well. And so I think the Trump administration has actually taken some steps to address that. He's gotten rid of DEI in government um, education. I think he's attacking it as far as on the school level. He's threatened to pull federal funding for public schools. I personally don't think public schools should exist, but anyway, there's been some movement on that. But I think again, if people start to see, if our leadership class and our institutions stop that crap, and we stop focusing back on meritocracy and stop making it about races, and stop attacking and talking about how white people are terrible because of the racism and the slavery that happened, when slavery has been existent for all of history and has been committed by every single race. Okay, we stop this garbage where we single out white people, we single out Christians, and we single out white males or whatever. Then if we take that out of the culture, that's one less thing, one less grievance that he has, that he can peddle to his audience. And uh, and the other thing that's attached to that is immigration. Okay, uh, he talks about it. I'm an immigrant. Okay, I came here the legal way. My parents waited 8 years. And after we came here, we started working. My parents went to night school to learn English. And the whole reason we came here was because this is a better country than the one we left. We came here with the full intention of assimilating, of becoming Americans and becoming proud Americans. And I like to think that we did. I have siblings who enrolled in the military, and we pay our taxes. We're not criminals. I like to think that we contribute to this country and whatnot, and because it has given us so much. Okay, but that's not what's coming in. That's not what the illegals who've come in are necessarily thinking. A lot of them maybe are. A lot of them I think are coming for the same reasons. But we can't have a bunch of people. Not to mention, you can't assimilate that many people. And I know that now you're not supposed to say that. Screw that. Yeah, yeah, we're supposed to assimilate. If you come over here, you come in and assimilate. Okay, so again, this is probably the one that the Trump administration has actually addressed. My understanding is, I think the last time I checked the numbers and whatever, or the reports, uh, illegal immigration is almost down to nothing. Now they need to fix legal immigration. Um, they need to fix legal immigration, because that's a problem too. I know that there's considerations now about whether there should be a full moratorium on immigration. I think that's a very, very legitimate. That's a very legitimate uh, concept. I think that's something we should consider. I mean, considering we probably, like JD Vance said, Vice President JD Vance says, like, we need to figure out who's here before we continue going. So I think that's a great idea. And I'll finish with this. There's my, uh, I'll finish with this. So another thing, or I'll mention this other part. Um, Another thing that Nick Fuentes does well is sometimes he'll put things in a context that actually makes sense. So there's this big brouhaha over the fact that Tucker platformed him. And there's rightfully so. There's a lot of backlash on some of the things he said, whether how serious or not. They're pretty atrocious and whatnot. By the way, I don't know how you can be America first and Stalin, pro Stalin. That's another reason, going back to what does he believe? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe he's just incoherent. Maybe we're taking him too seriously. But sometimes he'll make a point. He'll put things in a context, and this is part of his appeal, as I noticed. And you're like, oh, that actually makes sense. So he did this. For instance, he said, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Lindsey Graham, and I think it was him and Tucker or the other. They made the point. It's like, as bad as what Fuentes has said is, some of those things that he said, I think it's worse. That's what they said too. And I started agreeing. I was like, I think it's worse. It's not as bad. It's worse what these people have been advocating. And that is, now it's called a genocide. And I know I have a colleague who I respect very much who will totally disagree with me on the use of this word. I know the left likes to use it, that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide. But I remember when we were doing a daily show at the magazine, it was early on in Israel's campaign. And I brought up footage. We were showing footage of the bombings and stuff around over there. And I'm like, man, I can kind of see why people are starting to have some second thoughts. Like, what is this? Like, these guys are supposed to be the good guys. And let me put that out there too, because everyone's like, oh, you pro Hamas? It's like, no, I'm not pro Hamas. But I have no standards. I have no bar for Hamas. I do, however, have it for Israel. Israel is a first world nation. It's very advanced. It's very civilized. It has a lot of intellectual prowess. It's not Hamas. It's not the third world and whatever. It's like I have a higher bar for them. Okay. So when they go in there and they annihilate, all these people, you're telling me, okay, so the numbers now are like, I don't know, like 60,000. Obviously, they could be probably exploited and exaggerated. Obviously, it would benefit Hamas and it would benefit the pro Hamas sector, the whatever, the groups there, Iran to whatever. But there's no way that you can convince me that a bunch of innocent people didn't die. And there's no way you could convince me that was the best way to carry out that campaign, is to basically carpet bomb that entire little strip of land where 2 million people die. That's insane. It is insane. It is insane that people would actually advocate that and be like, oh, yeah, it's great. It's like they did what they had to do. Really? Really? You're telling me with all the technology, when they found Iran's leadership and they were targeting them, they were able to shoot missiles into like the apartment, into a big building. They knew the apartment of some of those leaders, and they were able to hone in just on that. And you're telling me that they couldn't do something like that? Instead, they had to basically turn that whole strip into rubble and kill thousands, tens of thousands of children and women. Come on, man. No, that's just insane. It's insane. It's insane that they have convinced anyone to buy this narrative. It is a BS narrative. It is inhumane. And I'm having a hard time figuring out how in the world is that Christian? Israel is not a Christian nation. Okay, so you want to start talking about the Old Testament where God asked the Israelis to go in and take the land and kill women and children and things like that and whatever. It's like that was when he was with them. The Israel now, God's people, are those who believe into him, and that includes Jews. It includes mostly Gentiles, though, and that is not a nation that has Christian leadership. And so there's two things are going against it. It's like they're killing women and children. They're not. I'm gonna have a hard time believing that they're on a mission from God. Okay, so it's like, so when he brings that up, when Tucker and or Nick bring up the fact that what they're advocating, the killing of all these people, versus the fact that Nick Fuentes just said naughty things, as Tucker likes to put it. I think it's worse what they're doing, and you got to wonder, are these people worse? That's kind of the question I have. Are they worse? Is it? How can it not be? It's just, it's an interesting, it's an interesting way to look at it. And when he talks about it, you're like, if you're an objective person, you're kind of like, yeah, yeah, why is it worse what he said? Because these people are on record advocating like continual like bombing. They've never expressed remorse, or most of them haven't expressed remorse. That being Levin, that being Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz. I haven't heard, people who have supported the campaign there. I haven't heard, especially from Levin and Shapiro, say, "Man, it's really unfortunate that all these children and women have been killed. I really wish I support the war and whatnot. I support them rooting out Hamas, but I really wish um, that we could have mitigated some of these deaths on women and children." I've never heard that from them, and so that's kind of, I think that's an interesting way to put it, and I think that adds to his appeal, because when he says things like that and he puts things in some of these contexts, it kind of makes sense. It's like he's not worse than these people. It's like I don't have to take a side. That's the thing. It's like everyone thinks that they buy into this binary um, this binary tribalism where like you have to take a side. It's like I don't have to take a side. I don't have to like Nick Fuentes, and I don't have to like the neocon crowd. I don't have to like Shapiro. I don't have to like Mark Levin. I don't have to like Nick Fuentes. Heck, I don't have to like Tucker, but I do, because I think he makes a lot of sense. I'm not buying into any of that. Okay, what we need to do is we need to look at the fact that he is bringing up legitimate grievances. Okay, those things that I mentioned, on top of the fact that he's speaking to a generation that is coming up in a world that in an America that has been robbed of its resources, that has been robbed of a lot of the opportunities that the boomers had, and even some of my generation and whatnot. It's become harder. Everything has become more difficult. It has become harder to have homes. It's become harder to get good paying jobs. Especially when you consider how everything is expensive. There are cities now that are completely unlivable. When we moved, before we moved down here to the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, we were looking at moving back to Montana, where where we lived before. We love Montana. We're always going to have a soft spot for Montana, but it was unaffordable. We couldn't afford to live in Montana. And one of the reasons that's happening, as all Montanans know, and people in Utah know as well, in Nevada, is that there's been a massive rush of refugees from Washington and mainly California who have fled into Montana because it got so expensive because of the socialist policies, the tax policies in those areas. So they come to Montana, they come to places like Bozeman, it's particularly in Kalispell, and they drive up the prices because they buy expensive homes or they pay over asking price for them. And this has been happening for many years. So anyway, this is the climate that Gen Z and people of that who are listening to Nick Fuentes are coming up in. So we better start understanding that what he's doing is he's presenting um, a lot of very legitimate grievances. And if we just sit there and hyperventilate over this garbage without looking into what it is that his appeal is, how much of it is legitimate, and let's address the legitimate issues, we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands because he seems to be one of the few who are talking about this, albeit in a very toxic, with lots of toxic and racist undertones and whatnot. Now, Tucker, I think, is doing a perfect job of it for the most part. I don't think he did anything wrong by talking necessarily to Nick Fuentes. Maybe he should have pressed him a little bit more. I thought he did to a certain degree. It's like he just made it clear. It's like we don't do that. We're not going to do this collective guilt thing. I think it's actually collectivism. When you lump in everyone with a particular race just because that race or that nation Israel seems to be pretty nefarious at times. I know I have a colleague. Not just one. I know lots of good Jewish Americans, patriotic Americans who do put America first. Let's just say that. And so this idea that I would never buy into that. It's a collectivist idea and whatnot. So we don't need to make it about that. But that doesn't mean that we can't say that Israel has a negative influence on our country, and we need to knock that off because we do. And I bet you I could find lots of Jewish friends who think the same thing. So that's all I'm saying. We need to look into what we need to take seriously why he's so popular, what of it is legitimate, and if we address those, that being our leadership class addresses those problems, we tackle on and we become again a non-interventionist country. If we stop the influence of any foreign nations on our country, if we make a cultural shift back to a merit-based culture, to one that offers opportunities to all and favors none and demonizes none, and if we make it easier. We have an economic system that makes it easier for the next generation to buy homes, to have a job, to have families. Then there's going to be no Nick Fuentes. There's not going to be little exploiters like him, little demagogues, and we can, maybe even he'll come around. Maybe he'll come around and become a force for mostly for good. And so we need to start thinking like that. Stop hyperventilating. Start whatever about all the crap he's saying, because in a sense, there are things that are worse than him. and it's happening to our country. And Nick Fuentes has nothing to do with the fact that our country is eroding and our leadership class, their policies have caused that. Okay. He is a toxic symptom of something that our leadership class has done. And it's time to start looking at that and stop being distracted by all, for weeks on end on these ridiculous things. Thank you.